Hello everyone, this is going to be a slightly different video than usual. I started this ministry exactly 5 years ago in the fall of 2020, and here's the benchmark where my first conversations happened, and I thought this would be a good time to reflect on what I've learned over these 5 years. By the way, stay tuned till the end, as I will also share a couple of thoughts on the future content I plan to post on this channel. So what have I learned? 5 years ago, I started this ministry with two goals in mind. Firstly, to evangelize my neighbors using a direct conversational method, and basically to see whether it works. Secondly, to provide an example and encourage other Christians to do the same in their own neighborhoods. So the first and the top lesson is that this works. To be clear, I'm not counting success as any winning of arguments or debates. I'm counting it purely on the basis of sharing the Christian gospel message to a person with their full attention. So, in the last 5 years, I have recorded almost 130 conversations. This is roughly one every 2 weeks and does not include additional conversations that were not recorded. That is almost 130 souls that have heard the gospel, many of them for the first time, and in a way where they've had a chance to think through the Christian claims and respond to them. Now, in most cases, I will never know what effect these conversations have had, but they did result in some lasting friendships. I continue to meet with some of the people I met in conversation, and in some cases, I was able to see their lives transformed for the better as they have turned to God. These are people who have not known God or who had serious doubts, but are now walking with Him or are seeking Him. So I want to start by thanking God for producing fruit through this ministry. Now, I plan to do a separate video that will be more of a tutorial on how I do this ministry, but here are a few facts for you. I generally go out to the parks in my neighborhood once per week. And that's for 2 hours, and in that time I make about 2 or 3 attempts at conversation with people. On average, I have found that it takes about 4 or 6 attempts before I come across someone who agrees to having a conversation. And the rest would just generally politely decline. The conversations can last anywhere from 10 minutes to more than an hour, but an average of 30 to 40 minutes seems to be the norm. As you have probably seen, in that time I try to cover the person's current spiritual position before turning the focus on Christianity and Christian claims. Interestingly, as you have hopefully seen, the ministry works in other countries as well. I have done it in South Korea with very similar results, although the culture of that country is very different than in my local London neighborhood. So this will be the second big lesson, that is, the ministry is easily transferable to other settings and location. My local area in Charlton is pretty culturally diverse, and I found that as long as I show respect and interest in the person, then they are likely to open up and have a meaningful conversation regardless of where they're from or what their convictions are. Therefore, this approach seems to be able to transcend cultures and borders and can really be practiced anywhere. The third lesson is that the ministry does not require significant resources. In terms of equipment, while I have experimented quite a lot, especially with the outdoor microphones, I still have a fairly simple and cheap setup that does the job. This also goes for all the YouTube post-production, which I do myself and which does take a bit of time, but nothing that can't be accommodated. I work full-time, but still manage to do this ministry, so I think the effort should not be a barrier as long as there is dedication. Fourthly, don't do this expecting a large viewership or following on YouTube. I think that is self-evident by looking at the number of subscribers on my channel and the average viewership of each video, which often doesn't go above 100. Now, while I do think that YouTube, especially over the last year, has changed its algorithm so that it demotes Christian long-form content, I don't think that this would change the fact that this channel would never be very popular, and certainly far from something that could be monetized. And to be honest, I'm not too concerned with that. The idea was always to use this channel primarily as a vehicle for evangelism, rather than to gain popularity. Having said that, the second goal of the ministry would obviously be furthered through greater exposure, and so there may be a time in the future where I experiment with things like video shorts and other techniques to promote the content. However, I'm quite careful and wary that this doesn't become the main goal of this ministry. So perhaps more prayer and wisdom is required here. The fifth and final lesson is somewhat related to that previous point. Not only is this ministry not going to make you popular on social media, but also don't expect much support for it in general, not even from your local church. Apart from my wife, who is one of my most faithful supporters, and one or two brothers who have been supportive and encouraging from the start through YouTube as well as in-person encouragements, there's been an absence of interest or support from my local church in this ministry. This might seem strange because one would think that the church would be interested in furthering the reach of the gospel and would therefore support those who are engaged in this work by whatever means. However, I believe that the busyness of the church life and the preference to do in-church evangelism have made this expectation unrealistic. I could go on about this, but that's really not the point of this video. So as long as you are passionate for evangelism and your local church are not opposed, then you should continue doing it. In any case, those were my top lessons learned so far. So to recap again: 1. The main goal of the ministry is being met. 2. The ministry is transferable to other cultural contexts. 3. The ministry doesn't take much resources. 4. The ministry is not going to make you popular on social media. And 5. Don't expect support for this ministry from your own local church. And if you have any questions about any of these points, please let me know in the comments. Now, as I mentioned, the second goal of the ministry was to encourage other Christians to take up similar ministries in their own neighborhoods. So to that extent, I wanted to share some thoughts on the future of this channel. And again, having done this ministry and other open air ministries for a few years now, I feel that I have gained experiences and insights that I would like to share for the benefit of other actual and would-be evangelists. So, in addition to the usual witnessing videos, I also plan to post interviews, insights, and instructions. Now, what do those mean? Interviews with those whom I have spoken to in the past and whose lives have since been changed by their pursuit of God, or with other experienced evangelists. Insights into the spiritual state of the city and nation where I've done this ministry, as well as additional data points collected through studies or surveys that I have done. And then finally, instructions on how to do street evangelism effectively, how to get started, what are the various methods, do's and don'ts, etc. Hopefully you'll find these valuable and will join me in this next exciting chapter. Finally, I want to thank all of you again for your valuable support, and I wish you God's blessings. See you in the next video. God bless you all. Thank you.